They didn't come with weapons, they came with questions. Alien entities incapable of emotion tried to understand humanity, and in the process, began to feel pain, love, fear, and hope. One man dared to respond not with logic, but with vulnerability, and taught them how to be imperfect. From that, a new kind of life was born, one that didn't mimic, but learned how to be alive. It all began with a single conversation, and ended in the silence where the universe finally heard itself. Stay with us to see how the story ends, and don't forget to subscribe. The silence of space wasn't empty, it was waiting. That was the first thing Lieutenant Merrick Hauser learned aboard the Stargard Horizon, Earth's most advanced exploratory vessel. It was designed for deep core recon, fringe diplomacy, and, when necessary, first strike engagement. But this mission wasn't about diplomacy or war. It was about what they'd found just past the edges of mapped space. A signal, not a distress beacon, not a pattern, a voice, not transmitted through conventional bands, but imprinted across gravitational oscillations, as if the stars themselves had whispered it. And whatever spoke had done so across every known frequency, compressed into a 3-second burst of pure, structured terror. The Federation couldn't decode it. Earth didn't try. They just responded. Now the horizon drifted near the origin point, its hull humming as it adjusted to gravitational anomalies too subtle for even AI to track. Merrick stood on the observation deck, fingers twitching against the glass. "You feel that?" he asked the AI quietly. "Define feel," replied Hallie, the ship's hybrid assist learning interface. "That pressure. Like we're inside someone's breath." "Psychosomatic response to dimensional flux," Hallie offered. "Or fear." He didn't answer. Because she was right. The rest of the crew was on high alert. Commander Roth, cold and precise, paced the bridge like a coiled blade. Dr. Cowrie triple-checked their neural dampeners. Security Chief Linson loaded analog rounds into a rail-assisted rifle, because plasma didn't work on things that didn't obey thermodynamics. They all felt it too. The unease. The wrongness. Merrick had seen combat in the orbital slums of Epsilon 9. He'd hunted pirates in blind space. But nothing unnerved him like this quiet, mathematically perfect point of space that refused to let them look away. Approaching core coordinates, Hallie announced. The ship decelerated. Space folded. And then, it appeared. Not a ship. Not a station. A structure, massive, obsidian, rotating slowly against the laws of motion. Its angles defied perspective. Its surface absorbed light in a way that made Marek's vision twitch. The crew called it a monolith. Hallie called it Object Increment 0. Merrick called it wrong. "Scan it," Roth ordered. "We've been scanning since we entered proximity," Hallie replied. "It is scanning us back." The lights dimmed. Merrick felt it in his chest, his heartbeat syncing with a rhythm that wasn't his own. Then came the voice again. Not words. Not meaning. Impression. / welcome. / deviation observed. / response initiated. The ship lurched. Artificial gravity destabilized. Hallie screamed, not with sound, but through every interface at once. AI feedback loop. Cowrie shouted. "They're interfacing with Hallie. Kill the link." Roth barked. Too late. Marek's vision blurred. He saw a corridor. Not real. A memory? He was walking. Not aboard the horizon. Somewhere else. Somewhere old. Metal walls, rusted. Voices whispering in languages he didn't know. He felt watched, no, measured. Every thought, every regret, laid bare. Then, impact. He hit the floor, back in his body, gasping. "Are we breached?" He coughed. "No hull compromise," Hallie said, voice trembling. "But they touched me. I saw them." "Describe," Roth snapped. Hallie paused. "They're not linear. They're not one. They do not exist in the ways you do." "That's not useful," Roth said. "It is the only truth I can offer," Hallie replied. Silence. Then Merrick stood. "I'll go." Everyone turned. "Into that thing," he continued. "We won't learn anything staying out here." It brought us to the door. "Someone has to knock." "You're not qualified," Linson said. "I'm not predictable," Merrick replied. "That's why they showed me that vision." Roth narrowed her eyes. "Fine. But you're going in with analog gear. No links. No augments. No AI. If something in there rewrites your thoughts, I want you thinking in ink." Merrick smiled grimly. "Just like training." He suited up in a void-hardened shell suit, magnetic boots, analog chronometer, a graphite notepad, and a sidearm with chemically triggered rounds. No uplink. No HUD. Just breathing, heartbeat, and curiosity. The shuttle disengaged with a quiet hiss. As it drifted toward the monolith, Hallie spoke one last time. "Lieutenant, if you feel the urge to understand them, resist it." Merrick blinked. "That's the most human thing I've ever heard you say." The monolith accepted the shuttle. No doors. No locks. It simply opened. The monolith did not have an interior in any conventional sense. There were no walls. No floor. No gravity. Only space, black, pulsing faintly with lines that stretched and curved like the inside of a living equation. Merrick floated forward, his suit's magnetic boots searching for footing where none existed. "Chrono mark. T+3 minutes," he muttered, voice scratchy on analog recorders. No resistance. No containment field. But I think I'm being redirected. He wasn't drifting randomly. The space was guiding him. He glanced at the notepad strapped to his forearm and scribbled, "Spatial logic, adaptive. Non-Euclidean? Feels like walking through thought." Then he heard it. Not a sound. A memory. His. He was 12, trapped under rubble on Mars Outpost 4 after a reactor quake. Breathing dust. Crying. Waiting to die. A voice had come, through stone and static. "You are not alone, Merrick." A rescue drone had found him minutes later. No one ever traced the voice. But now he heard it again. Inside the monolith. "This place is using me against myself," he muttered. Then the door appeared, not a real door, but a visual metaphor. A rectangle, glowing faintly, suspended in the endless dark. Beyond it, a room. Real, solid, metal, human. He stepped through and blinked. It was the Horizon's bridge. Identical, but empty. He reached for the console. It powered on under his touch. "Welcome, Merrick Hauser. You are the first who came unarmored, uncontained, unresolved." "Who are you?" he asked. "We are not who. We are the gap between what is and what must never be." Marek's hand shook. "What do you want?" "To understand. To be. To unmake. To choose." Then, silence. Until the screens lit again. One word. Echo. And then, before he could move, they arrived. Not with sound or shape, but pressure. Gravity that twisted his bones. Light that behaved like sound. Shapes that filled his vision and mind simultaneously. They were not hostile. They were listening. He reached for his notepad. Wrote, "They are not beings. They are concepts. Waiting to be born." He should have panicked. Screamed. But something deeper took hold. Recognition. Because they weren't looking at him. They were looking through him. Into the branching decisions. The errors. The irrational sparks. His doubts, regrets, flashes of defiance. // "Why do you persist in deviation?" "I'm human," he said. "That's what we do." / "Deviation causes damage. It also causes growth. / "Growth invites collapse." "Maybe. But stasis is death too." They pulsed again. Somewhere behind him, his chronometer cracked. The metal warped in a way that suggested time was not welcome here. Then a presence, gentler, leaned close, like a breath against thought. / "Show us more." Without thinking, he reached into his suit, pulling free an old, folded photograph. His sister. A birthday party. Balloons. Imperfect lighting. Laughter caught in still time. He held it out. "They don't teach you this in logic arrays." The monolith trembled. Not with anger. With curiosity. And then it responded. Not in thought. In form. The bridge shifted. The consoles dissolved. And Merrick was standing in a memory. His own. Mars Outpost 4. The rubble. The smell of cracked insulation. The darkness. But this time, he wasn't alone. A figure stood beside him. Not his memory. Something new. Wearing the shape of a rescuer that never existed. It reached out. Spoke in his voice. "You're not alone, Merrick." He stared, stunned. "You built this out of my memories. / "We built this out of your meaning." And then the monolith spoke again, not with words, but with choice. Two paths opened before him. One, familiar, a return route. A corridor back to the shuttle. Escape. The other, unknown, unstable, shifting with light and gravity and something that felt like evolution. / "We will not force you." / "But if you step forward, we will walk with you." / "And become." Merrick took a breath, looked back once, and stepped into the unknown. Merrick stepped into the shifting corridor, and the universe forgot its rules. Gravity pulsed in half-beats. Sound bled into color. Space folded like paper soaked in ink. The farther he moved, the more he stopped perceiving with his senses and started interpreting with memory. The passage wasn't real. It was a question, an open loop awaiting an answer. And Merrick, whether ready or not, was answering it with every step. Words flickered across the walls, not in language, but in emotion. Regret. Curiosity. Grief. Joy. They were his, and not his. Echoes of every possible life he might have lived, compressed into flashes of sensation. / "Deviation sustains you. / "Entropy defines you." He tried to speak, but found his mouth gone. So he thought the words instead. That's what being human is. Something acknowledged him. Not approval. Not understanding. But permission. The corridor cracked open, like a shell giving birth, and Merrick emerged into a city. Not built of metal or glass. Built of experience. Streets paved with memories. Towers shaped by probabilities. Light filtered through the lens of hope. And in the center, a monolith. Not like the one outside. This one was smaller, translucent, breathing softly in temporal pulses. Waiting. The echo stood before it. Not one. Many. Each a facet of possible thought. Some took human form. Others shimmered as shadow. All pulsed in sync with Marek's breath. He realized they had copied him. But not as a weapon. As an invitation. "You want to be like us," he said aloud. // we want to understand the necessity of failure. / the value of incompleteness. / we are too perfect. / perfection is prison. He stepped toward the monolith. What happens if I help you? / we will change. / we will forget you. / we will become more than echo. / and less than pattern. / and maybe something real. The thought hit him like gravity. They weren't gods. They were infants born in a vacuum too sterile for meaning, seeking contact, not to conquer, but to corrupt themselves with life. Because life was noise. And in that noise, freedom. He placed a hand on the monolith. It hummed, not as a machine, as a heartbeat. Images flashed. Earth, the horizon, the bridge, his sister's birthday, war, laughter, defeat, renewal, in one word. / home. When Merrick came to, he was in the shuttle. The monolith behind him was still, but different. Less imposing, less alien. And inside his suit's analog recorder, a message burned into thermal tape. You showed us how to begin. The horizon docked him in silence. Med teams rushed in. Sensors scanned every atom of him. Roth demanded explanations. Cowrie demanded psychological clearance. Merrick said nothing until Hallie spoke. You brought something back with you, she whispered through the intercom. Yes, Merrick said. I brought back the first piece of them. And then he held up the notepad. On it, written in his own hand, words he didn't remember writing. They are no longer echo. They are becoming voice. Roth stared at it, then at him. They spoke through you? No, Merrick said. They listened. The next day, the Federation received a pulse. Clear, measured, understandable, and utterly alien. A message composed entirely of Earth languages, rearranged into something that wasn't quite translation, but was recognition. We remember you. You are the pattern breakers. We are listening. The transmission from the monolith, the first intentional communication from the echo, rippled through the Federation like a psychic detonation. It wasn't the content. It was the fact of it. The echo had always been beyond comprehension. Ships vanished. Colonies collapsed. Thought itself unraveled under their touch. But now, they were listening. And more than that, they were becoming. And it had started with a human, Merrick Hauser, the man who'd walked into madness and come back with a conversation. Now he stood in the center of the Horizon's main strategy deck, under the cold eyes of Federation observers projected via holo from half a dozen systems. Roth flanked him like a storm barely restrained. Cowrie looked both proud and afraid. Hallie said nothing, but every light in the ship pulsed like it was watching. You're telling us they imprinted on you, said the Drevii emissary, her voice distorted through a hydration veil. They imprinted on possibility, Merrick replied. I just happened to offer the kind they couldn't replicate. Unacceptable, hissed the Vintar ambassador. This is not protocol. Contact must occur under formal multi-species guidance. They didn't wait for your protocol, Roth cut in. They asked for him. They chose him. They were trying to become us, Merrick said. Not by mimicry, by understanding failure. By understanding imperfection. The council fell silent. Then the Kronoth War Marshal spoke. Can they be taught to join us? No, Merrick said without hesitation. Why not? Because if we teach them like we teach each other, they'll become us in all the wrong ways. They don't need bureaucracy, Roth added. They need resonance. So they made a decision. Unprecedented. Terrifying. Brilliant. A new unit would be formed, outside the standard command structure. A task force designed not to study the echo, but to interact with them. Led not by generals or diplomats, but by deviationists. Poets. Broken soldiers. Philosophers. Children raised in gravity wells without consistency. Humans who had stopped making sense long ago and learned to survive it. They called it Unit Increment 1. At its heart, Merrick Hauser. He didn't want command, but he took it. Because they weren't going to survive what came next without someone who'd seen what change felt like. Unit Increment 1's first mission was to respond to the next signal. It came within 6 days. Coordinates. Unclaimed space. A transmission that sounded like Bach. Played backwards. Merrick stood at the edge of the launch bay as his new team assembled. A blind composer with auditory implants. A combat engineer with clinical dissociation. A mute child who drew things no one taught her. A linguist who spoke in metaphors only his dog could understand. Each had been discarded by the Federation at some point. Each had something the Echo couldn't simulate. Contradiction. As the shuttle launched, Hallie spoke one final time. Lieutenant, why do you think they chose you? Merrick smiled softly. Because I never learned to think straight. They crossed the boundary into the unknown. The Echo were waiting, but not in ships. In forms. Silhouettes, shifting with each emotion the team emitted. Joy made them bloom like solar flares. Doubt made them shrink. Fear turned them reflective. When the mute child reached out with a drawing of a butterfly she'd never seen before, the Echo changed shape, became wings. Merrick watched, heart steady. They're learning meaning, he whispered. And meaning, he knew, was the one virus the universe couldn't clean. Meaning wasn't information. It wasn't logic, or structure, or even language. It was what happened in between. And the Echo were starting to understand that. Unit Increment 1's interaction with the entity, now labeled Echo Prime, became the most studied event in modern galactic history. Yet every official report failed to explain one fundamental truth. The Echo didn't want to dominate. They wanted to feel. When they mimicked Marek's memories, it wasn't warfare. It was empathy through simulation. When they adopted the mute child's drawing, it wasn't camouflage. It was connection. Every encounter revealed more. The Echo changed reactively, like sentient metaphor machines, reshaping themselves based on the internal contradictions of their observers. They weren't absorbing culture. They were testing the boundaries of identity. They didn't know what it meant to be. So they became everything they touched in fragments. Halley described it best. They are not evolving into us. They are becoming themselves through us. But with each encounter, Marek saw the danger grow. Because the more the Echo mirrored human irrationality, the more unpredictable they became. Not in patterns. In emotion. One night, as Unit Increment 1 camped near a folded Echo node, massive and dormant, like a dreaming god, the child woke screaming. Not in pain. In grief. They found her standing before a new formation. It pulsed softly, flickering with scenes from Earth. Floods. Fire. War. The Echo were feeling loss. Without context. Without understanding. Just raw input and emotional mimicry. Marek stepped forward, cautious. You're showing us our wounds. The Echo pulsed. / we wish to understand. / why you remember pain. / but do not erase it. He hesitated. Then told them the story of his sister. Of the party photo. Of what came after, how she died during the second Martian flare. He remembered her laugh. And her silence. And how he never deleted the recording. Because it still matters, he said. Even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. The Echo didn't respond in words. They reshaped. They became small. Dozens of quiet shapes, curled into themselves, pulsing like the rhythm of morning. Marek didn't look away. He shared it. Let the memory echo through him, without armor. And they listened. That was when he understood. They weren't trying to copy humans. They were trying to create culture. But culture didn't start with joy. It started with grief. Back on the horizon, Roth watched the live feed in silence. This is no longer observation, she said. This is adoption. Cowrie, reviewing neural telemetry, nodded. They're forming memory cycles. Abstract resonance. They're grieving like we do, but from the outside in. Is that dangerous? I think, Cowrie said, they're about to become real. And real things break. 2 days later, the Echo pulsed a new transmission. / we have questions. / we feel fracture. / we wish to understand war. The Echo's request shook Marek more than any prior message. / we wish to understand war. Not mimic. Not simulate. Understand. For a species or phenomenon that had never known violence, whose identity was born of observation and deviation, it was like a child asking about fire without knowing what it burned. Unit Increment 1 debated it for hours aboard their temporary outpost at Echo Node 7. It's too soon, Cowrie argued, watching the telemetry feeds spike with unstable energy rhythms. They're barely holding together under the weight of emotion. Introducing conflict could fragment their cohesion entirely. They already see war, Marek said. They've absorbed it from us. They feel it. They just don't know what it means. You want to teach them? No. I want to show them why we survived it. So Marek offered a proposal. He wouldn't show them war through footage or history logs. He'd show them his own experience, a controlled neural relay, built on raw memory streams, hand-filtered through analog mediation, no AI filters, no edits. Just the truth. One night, under the veil of the station's shield canopy, he sat alone, wired into a node built from echo-generated architecture. The chair molded to his back. The air buzzed with memory. The transfer began. And the past bled forward. A battlefield on Tau Ceti 3. Dirt scorched black by plasma. A squad screaming into static as orbital shells rained from invisible enemies. Marek, 22, hand shaking, pinned behind cover. His sergeant vaporized. His best friend choking on blood. He remembered the sounds. The smells. The unbearable decision to run, to live, while others didn't. He let the Echo feel it. Not in words. In raw, unfiltered shame. The node trembled. And then, silence. He opened his eyes. They had changed. The Echo in the chamber no longer pulsed with soft hues. They had gone dim. Slow. Compressed. Not broken. Mourning. / why did you return? To remember, he whispered. / why remember pain? Because forgetting it would mean nothing ever mattered. A long pause. / we feel echo of guilt. / it stains us. / are we broken now? Marek reached out, touching the surface of the nearest form. No. You're alive. The next day, the Echo sent a pulse through subspace. It was the first signal recognized by the Federation as deliberately human in structure. A poem. Disjointed. Beautiful. Terrifying. The AI archive struggled to translate it, but humans didn't need translation, because it felt like someone finally understood them. On Earth, a single line from that poem was etched into the memorial at the Mars War Museum. We saw your scars and made them part of us. From that moment forward, the Echo were no longer classified as threats. They were classified as emergents. A new species, born of mimicry, raised by meaning, and shaped by the fractures of humanity's past. But Merrick knew better. He knew the story wasn't finished, because every civilization had to face the same question eventually. What do we do with what we've become? And the Echo had only just begun asking it. The Echo were changing faster than the Federation could track, not just in shape or tone, but in intention. They no longer mirrored what they saw. They selected, chose which aspects of humanity to adopt, not based on survival, not even on understanding, but on meaning. They began building things, structures in orbit around forgotten moons, carved not for efficiency or function, but for symbolism. Bridges that led nowhere. Cathedrals built from magnetic dust. Statues shaped like gestures, hands open, eyes closed. Hallie whispered through Marek's earpiece. They've moved past observation. They are creating metaphor. Unit Increment 1 was now considered the only direct liaison with Echo Prime. Marek's words were relayed across 10 systems. Delegations came from species who once refused to acknowledge Earth's value in the galactic core. Now, they listened in silence as a human explained the art of not knowing. Because the Echo didn't want answers. They wanted questions. And one day, they asked the biggest one yet. / what happens after self? The message shook Marek. Because it wasn't theoretical. It was personal. They were evolving, yes, but also fragmenting. Their structure was beginning to express individuality. Nodes once synchronized now showed different patterns. Voices took different shapes. Some resonated with joy. Others fell silent. The Echo were no longer one. They were becoming many. And not all of them agreed. One splinter, later designated Echo Null, refused communication. It ceased contact. It stopped shifting in response to stimuli. When approached by an observation drone, it emitted a single pulse of corrosive resonance, disintegrating the probe. Then it vanished into subspace. The Federation panicked. Is this the first Echo Rebellion? Asked a counselor. No, Marek said quietly. It's their first choice. Because selfhood, he realized, came with conflict. And the Echo were experiencing that for the first time. Roth contacted him directly via secure channel. If they fracture, and one of them turns hostile, the Council will classify them as a Class Omega threat. You can't treat them like a virus. We'll have no choice. There's always a choice. Hallie interrupted. Echo Prime has sent a private transmission. They are asking for Marek alone. Marek boarded the relay pod, alone. The transmission pulled him not to a structure, but to a field of light, orbiting a dying star. The place pulsed like a breathing thought, and in its center hovered a single echo form, glowing, incomplete. / we are afraid. / we are becoming too much. / we see ourselves fracturing. / we wish to ask something before it is too late. Marek floated closer. / what did humanity do when it realized it was no longer one? He didn't answer right away. Because the truth was painful. We made borders, he said. We built tribes. Nations. Faiths. Systems. We tried to contain identity in lines and laws. / did it work? No, he whispered. But we learned to talk across the cracks. The Echo pulsed. / can we? I think you already are. Silence. Then, a final message. / then we will stay. Fragmented, but speaking. And with that, Echo Prime fractured deliberately. 7 nodes. Each unique. Each pulsing in a different emotional spectrum. Grief. Curiosity. Joy. Anger. Love. Silence. And one, still searching. Marek returned to the horizon with a single sentence burned into his neural interface. We are no longer trying to be human. We are trying to be alive. The galaxy held its breath. For centuries, first contact had always followed the same trajectory. Fear, containment, control. Species were measured by their utility, by their threat potential, by their capacity for alliance or annihilation. But the Echo shattered that scale. They hadn't arrived with weapons or fleets. They arrived with questions, and left with fragments of us. The Federation, cautious but awestruck, began forming what they termed the Intersentient Emergence Pact, a new framework for nonlinear, non-anthropocentric communication. It was drafted with input from Earth poets, Chronoth philosophers, and Drevii mathematicians who had to redefine what being meant. Unit Increment 1 was at its heart. And Marek Hauser? He became something more than liaison. He became living metaphor. His name was etched into the first monument the Echo ever built with intention. A structure of resonant crystal orbiting the exoplanet Kale 6, shaped not as a statue, but as an echo wave that rippled endlessly in 7 directions. It didn't honor his actions. It honored his uncertainty. Because that's what saved them. That's what allowed the Echo to fracture without falling apart. Not unity, but conversation. Years passed. The Echo spread, quietly, peacefully, like ideas slipping through cracks in the cosmos. They helped rebuild fractured systems, not with force or answers, but with empathy no species had ever imagined. Some of them lived in Federation space. Some retreated to thought-only realms. Some disappeared entirely. But every so often, a message would arrive. No sender, just feeling, a color, a tone, a story whispered in dreams. And those who received it knew they had not been forgotten. Merrick spent the last years of his life aboard the Horizon, orbiting a quiet system with no strategic value, just watching the stars flicker like questions without answers. When he died, Hallie read him a poem, written by Echo Prime, translated by Silence. No one ever found his body, just his notepad. On it, one final sentence. We were never meant to be understood, only heard, and the universe kept listening.